Yeah, oh, perfect. It came up. Awesome.
It came up, but it's labeled as Prophetic Destiny.
Yeah, we can't change the name until after. That's the one downfall of this thing. So we're gonna have to change the name or edit the name either now or after. At least it's up.
Dev! Dev! Devin! How do I? Okay.
You can't talk.
Do I start on here? Dev. Do I start on here? It's going? It's going. Yes. Guess so. Do we have to start it?
Good morning, everybody. Happy Sunday. I just want to say good morning. I hope you guys are having a wonderful morning so far. I don't know how your week has been, whether it's been a tough week or a great week. But we can just meet in the middle, we all get just as a family and just spend time together. So I'm just going to pray us in. Father God, we just love you and we adore you. And we thank you for the opportunity to worship you this morning. I thank you that your goodness is unending, Lord. That your goodness is like a river that we can just step into, Lord. And we thank you that you're a good Father who holds out your hand and invites us to step into that goodness. And so we just come to you this morning and we just love you and we adore you and we worship you and we just want you to be exalted in this place. And I pray this in your precious name, Lord. Amen. You're not far away, coming close. Oh, you can ask me when you're coming close. You're like starlight in the dark. And the smiles can't conceal. And every glimmer is a spark, catching fire as you break through.
all that's been provided, everything that's been provided is actually for you. It is for your kingdom. It's not for us. And we just say no to the flesh this morning, no to the fleshly desires. And we say yes to you. Yes to everything you've provided. Yes to your kingdom being manifest here on earth, in front of our eyes. Yes, Lord. Yes to your presence. Yes to fresh encounters with you, God. Yes. Yes to your presence this morning. Yes, Lord. We receive that we can be that conduit that you just freely flow through, God, to a hurt and lost and dying world. We say yes. Yes to your presence, because without that we have nothing to give them. It is so thick and tangible in this place today. I want to encourage you to press and receive. There's always more. Sing to him a new song this morning. Sing to him. Sing to him a new song this morning. Bodies in this room this morning. There's healing for your minds in this room this morning. Just receive. Just receive. You are over it, and you are overcoming it. I thank you that even for the testimony I heard yesterday of schizophrenia, instantly, Lord God, being set free, this woman, and freedom and breakthrough. God, I thank you, God, we say more. Do it again. Do it again, Lord. With every nervous disorder in this place, we thank you. You have already spoken that there is healing for that. There is breakthrough for that. Blood disorders. You need to line up. Blood, you need to line up with what has already been paid for. The finished work of the cross is enough. These clots that are within Jim's body, we say no more. No more. We speak freedom right now to his body. If he's on the drums, I don't care. Get around him, lay hands on him, we say no more today. They've been plaguing you long enough. No more. No more. Can I have some people gather around Lane here? I'm going to stand in the gap for Nisha this morning. The things that are going on in her body are not of the kingdom, and we say no more. No more in the name of Jesus. Breakthrough for Nisha this morning. God, we lifted Phillipson and Kelsey to you, God, and their situation in Haiti, their van situation. We ask for provision, God, for this van to be fixed. We ask for your peace to rule and reign in Haiti. No more upheaval, no more unrest, but we speak your rest over the nation of Haiti. And we thank you, Lord God, for the work that Phillipson and Kelsey are doing. And God, we just speak provision. We speak provision to them, God. We thank you, God, that you are the God that meets our needs. God, you know our needs even before we know them. So I thank you for meeting them right where they're at, Lord God, every person on that base. Lord, I thank you for their provision. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Continue healing and provision in this place.
Room full of people who see the kingdom of God in their minds and in their hearts. And so our desire is so great. And this is a congregation of people with heart, passion, and love. And we are seeking the kingdom. We are seeking that so very. And I just feel God speaking. I just see people running after desires, and God is saying, focus only on what you need, and running after me. I will give you the desires of your heart. So lay down those desires at His feet. Focus on what you need for the day. Focus on what you need, and run after Him. Run after His heart.
That's His word. Begin at His kingdom first, and He'll take care of the rest. Nobody loves like He does. We thank you, God, for your love that casts out all fear, God, in this room today. Give us your vision for our minds, for our bodies, for this church, for this city, this region, the nation, the nations. Your vision, God. Your vision. Good testimonies. The healing from this morning. So we just thank you in advance. Thank you in advance for what you just accomplished here today. I'm Christy, for those that I don't get to meet yet. And my husband and myself started Living Water 15 years ago this year. Possible? Okay. Yeah, just getting back into this time zone, so things are a little foggy. Just want to welcome, if we have any visitors in the room, please, maybe you could just have the elders stand up and give a wave so people have questions, who to go to that would have some answers. We've got Bruno, John, and Sharon, Michael, and Trish, Lane. Yes, you do. Please grab any of us if you have any questions today. We have somewhere a slide that tells about our church app. But we do have a church app that you can find whether you have an Android or Apple or anything. It's just Living Water Church. And we're going to go ahead and take up our offering. If I can have the ushers come up. If you need an envelope, just raise your hand. Here's that. It has all give online. There's a Bible on there. It's giving people time to write checks or whatever. Yes. So good. See, Paul, you fall down so we can catch, right? You know, it's a family story. Okay. We have ushers now. If you need an envelope, raise your hand. His presence, and so we have joy. Thank you, Lord. I walked in the upper room this morning, and I'm so sorry, John and Sharon. I was late. It's like I live closer now, and then I'm late to church. What's up with that? But I walked in, I couldn't stand up. Next thing you know, I was like on my face. His presence is just so thick in this place today, so thank you, Lord. All right, let's go ahead and pray for the offering. God, I thank you so much that just everything belongs to you, and as part of our worship, God, we can just give a portion back to you now. I thank you for the multiplication of what's given this morning. I thank you, God, that you are not a God of lack, but you are a God of abundance. And so even for each person that is giving this morning, I just speak abundance over your life. There is always more. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, we've got a few announcements. I'm going to borrow my husband's glasses so I can read them. Wednesday night service is at 6:30. It's a great time of just pressing in and listening to what God is saying in a more intimate way. If you're hungry for more, be here. And if you have some friends that know that God's got more for them, please bring them along. Men's Advance. Registration is now open, and we have a video and some details coming from Paul. And maybe he's going to write this down right now, but his number's on here if you need more information. 970-596-0200. Do we have the movie ready to play? Paul, do you want to come talk about the advance? The video. I just got to say, first of all, I love Men's Advance. I don't like it when people say retreat because we don't retreat, we advance.
Amen. God's got some humor. Let's just say that right now. So supposed to give this announcement 2 weeks ago, and up all night, God firing me up about it. And then last week, Michael's like, hey, you can do it. And last week, I got nothing. This week, I didn't even know I was doing it. But here it is. So, it's all good. So, I'm just going to go back to the important parts of what God is speaking to me in this. So, there's Men's Advance Retreat. This is at Charis Bible College down in Woodland Park. If you haven't been there, amazing campus. Andrew Womack Ministries. You go on the property and the presence of God is there. It's very, very happy. Anyway, so Men's Advance, this is happening March 14th to 16th. We've got a house that is rented with room for, well, there's 15 beds, but we can use some cots and some other things. So the idea of this, the enemy is really having an attack on separating, I think, about relationships in general. But, we don't have, it used to be that it was in the culture, it was part of a man's journey to train what I believe the heart behind this is, it's about us getting together to start to get to know one another and start learning how to do battle together, start working at getting out there and training together. So it's just a good opportunity, I think, for us to get to know one another, but then also to go get filled up with what it means to advance, not retreat. Michael shared a word a couple weeks ago. You know, most armor, all armor is in the front. It's not in the back. So when you retreat, you open yourself up. So you either stand your ground or you make an advance. And so I do. I think all of us need some training in how to better stand in this battle. And so it should be a good time. Again, some costs on this. It is $45 for the lodging for the 2 nights, right? And then they have vendors on site, so we can either, you know, bring food, get food while we're there. They do have an option for 2 very good meals for another $40. That's a lunch on Friday and dinner on Saturday. Like kind of a fancy 4 or 5 course meal or something like that. So we're kind of leaving the food options open. I think all of us can just do what we're comfortable with, what we like. The other part of it was there will be about a 7-hour break in between sessions on that second day, between the morning and the afternoon. There will be things going on after retreat, like prayer rooms. I can't remember everything on there, but a lot of various things. You can definitely go on Paris College website, check all that stuff out. But we were also looking at maybe doing like a hike or something just as a collective group. And I think what we can do is, you know, we can leave the options open. You know, some of us might go up and hike, some people might stay. You know, we want people to do what the Lord needs to do. Should be a good time. If you want to sign up, you can contact me, but we have to do the registration through Keras, and then we can work out the cost. So, yeah, there's links on the website, and there are people who have donated to sponsor if you can afford. It's like, don't let that be something that keeps you from going. So you can take the time, possibly to cover it. So, all right.
This is actually a conference I watched before online, so I'm excited for you guys. I love everything Keras does. I think it's amazing. I watch it too, and I get stuff out of it. The next thing is we need donations for translation devices. We're wanting to start translating live sermons, whether, go Spanish service. The Spanish service, I don't know if you guys know, and anytime you want to stay, we encourage you. It starts at 1:30. Pastor Bruno, wave at everybody, leads our Spanish service. This group is growing leaps and bounds, not just numbers, but in their walk with the Lord, and so it's just both. Lots of good growth happening there, and so we want everything to be English and Spanish, bilingual, and unfortunately it's going to take a lot of money, and so we humbly ask for your help. If you have a little extra something somewhere, just pray, and whatever God would ask you to do, so you're leading and do it. So Bruno's mom actually translated for me at the last women's breakfast, and oh my, we had a really good time as we were here. No, how amazing it was. It's about $6,000 for the in-ear devices, so that's what we're looking at getting. So we want to be able to, we're one family, we're one body, and we have English-speaking people and we have Spanish-speaking people, and we just want to bring everybody together more. So something to pray about. And just mark your check or your envelope. What translation device? I guess. Women's Connection. The men's aren't the only ones that get to get away. We are getting away in the end of June, but prices go up the end of February. You can register, it's $250 if you register by the end of February. Otherwise, it goes up to $270 after February. On this, we've had a few people that have registered and requested roommates, and those roommates haven't registered yet. So you might want to, if you put a preferable roommate on there, you might want to talk to them and actually have them go, and then you could room them. Yeah, Jim. I'm talking to you. I think he did, but I'll look. We'll check it out. Oh, you did. You two should talk to each other, and then, Marissa and Jenny. Anyways, all right. More info can be found about all this stuff at www.lwc.us. And we're going to release the kiddos now. If you want to come up. We were here 2 weeks ago, and we're praying for those of us that were going to Thailand. And I know it blessed everyone when these kids got around going and eating and praying for them. It just shows how mighty and awesome they are. Wish you can go to Thailand. We will make it. Yes. Let's pray. Stretch your hands out this way. Lord, I thank you so much for each boy and girl here. We need more boys. Your boys are outnumbered. Bring in the boys, Lord. Lord, we thank you for you to continue to rise up within them and show yourself strong. There is no junior Holy Spirit. I thank you, God. They're not a half of a person. They are a whole person with the whole Spirit of God. And we say, do more than more. In Jesus' name. Amen. Stephen Owens. Come on up. It's your turn.
All right.
so little, but they're so happy.
I've experienced something I've never been to, halfway around the world. It's a bit, at the other side of the world, I'm just, you got that? Right. I've never been on the foundation before, and the stage was in, coming away from this, really blown away by the size of it. And how many ministries that we do, even more ministries and really getting to think that giving children the counsel, teach adults, teenagers, they're taking slowly in hurt children, broken kids, sex trafficking children, boys and girls, all alike. I think for me the most profound thing was when I saw Steve and Christy lead in a capacity that I've never seen them lead before, outside of these four walls. I've never seen them lead the way they led. And so I truly respect them more in a different light than when I see them here, because you see them as pastors here, but when you see them outside of this, you see them as a different light. You see them as truly apostle leaders that take out and they go and they till the ground, they break down stuff, but they love people generally, unconditionally outside of this place. They love people the same way here as they do over there. It's just a different way of leadership. So there was a very level of new respect I have for them. But I think there were a couple of highlights for me. First of all, we were praying for people in the church on Thursday morning before the women's conference started Thursday night. And so we were praying for this one young man, and he stuttered really bad. Well, I grew up stuttering. I had to see a speech therapist. So I told Nancy, so I prayed for him, and right away he started talking without stuttering. Second one was a guy that had a motorcycle wreck, had metal in his shin. And so Trish was there with me, I think Cheryl was there, I was praying for him. And as soon as I touched his shin, I started massaging his leg, and I just felt the Holy Spirit start doing something. Trish even felt it. And he just went, there's no more pain. He went run up and down the aisles of the church, and he wasn't working anymore. And then I think the biggest highlight was we got to meet our sponsor, the little girl that we sponsored. And that just really melted my heart, because as soon as we got her, we went to go see the elephants, and we started walking, got out of the boat, and right away she grabbed my hand. And, you know, when you see an 11-year-old girl that's lost everything in her life, she lost her mom, her biological father is addicted to opiates, her stepfather is an alcoholic and abuser. Her mom gave her up to the foundation. She has nothing. She wasn't getting anything. Cheryl and I took her and we treated her with loyalty. She'd never been inside a restaurant before, and she was amazed at the restaurant. And it really changed my life. It really showed me how spoiled we are here, and how we need to get out of our comfort zones here, and get out of our narrow thinking here, and make this a place where the broken and hurting can come in without being judged, and without being condemned, because that's what we're here to do.
Okay, I guess I get to talk. No, sorry, that's not what I meant. I just saw such a hunger for God that you don't see a lot in America. And I think there's still a hunger here. We just don't see it prevalent in our churches. And the people wanting whatever God has, and to experience the new things that God has for them. And it challenged me to really feel like, you know, there's so many people out there that every seat in this place should be filled with people wanting to come in and just understand and who God is. And I'm with Rich, you see Steve and Christy in a new way in another country. Besides being a crack up, I mean, I laugh so much. They have so much authority and respect from the Aka Foundation and the people in Thailand. And to see that, we realize what a joy and an honor we have to have them here as leaders of our church. And so in order for us to appreciate that, we need to do the things that they ask us to do and be under their leadership. So I really appreciate that. I think the highlight for me was meeting our little girl that we sponsor. It was just amazing. I lived in Brazil as a missionary kid for almost 20 years, so seeing, you know, this little child that had nothing and understanding that, because I've seen that before, it was just awesome to be able to love on her. And we got to buy her a new little dress, and she wore it on Sunday, and she was so proud of her new little dress that she had. And you could tell that she just really didn't have that much. But one of the highlights for us was we came back to the foundation, and she grabbed both of our hands, and she pulled us to our room. She kept pulling us, yeah, come on. And she went in her room, and she brought us each a little stuffed teddy bear that was hers. And she gave it to us, and I felt like, I don't really want to take her toy, but I knew how much that meant to her, that she was giving us something back for what we'd done to her. So when we got home, we put them up in a prominent place with our little picture of her, and so we could remember to continue to pray for her every day. And yeah, we saw the Spirit of God move in big time ways. We need to see that here as well. We do see it, but it was amazing to see all these hundreds of women that came to the conference to hear Christy speak, and Christy was so free in the Spirit, and just, you know, it was amazing how the Lord connected all of us as far as spiritual things and things He showed us, and then it was what she spoke about, and so I was really grateful for that. We could go into that, we could go on all day, but I know you want to hear Steve speak because, you know, he's Steve.
Okay, so the highlight of my trip, the beach. Actually, I'm not kidding, because it was really, really nice after ministry, but two real quick things. It was awesome. So for real, it was the beach. But sand between my toes, catching the sun. Anyway. So there was a lot of legs that grew out, but the one that really stood out to me is this one boy. He sat down and his legs grew out, and it wasn't even about his legs growing out and his back pain going away, which that's what I thought, because that's what God does. He doesn't want any of us to be in pain, right? No pains of God. Well, Nancy had asked him, so I go ask him if he feels any different, if he feels anything different, and he looked at her and he says, my heart has changed. So not only did his legs grow out, and we're still believing for his hip to rotate because his foot was kind of turned out a little bit, but you just saw his whole continence. So, you know, even in legs growing out, that's an awesome thing to see, but guess what? It's up to God what He does. So He moved on his heart, changed his heart. The other one was, Nancy cracked me up. She goes, Trish, that had to be the highlight of the whole trip. There was this one gal, the whole ministry team, we started praying for everybody, and this lady, she was really, really large, and I started looking at her, and I caught her eyes. I thought, oh boy, I'm staring at a demon. You know, I knew right away. And she's all of a sudden she starts manifesting and doing this thing, and I'm like, you will not manifest in this place. And I kept eye contact with her, and I just started saying, Jesus, Jesus. And so I'm moving like this, and following her eyes, Jesus, and all of a sudden she went, boom, and the Holy Spirit just took over. And Nancy just started cracking up laughing. She went like this, but I didn't have to do any deliverance or anything. I just said Jesus and looked at her right in the eyes, and boy, it stopped, and God had His way with her. So it was awesome, amazing. I could tell you a multitude more testimonies, but the beach really was really nice afterwards. So. Oh, one more thing. I do have one more. I overcame something personally. So the last two trips that I've been on, I really had a challenge with the food. Because Steve mentioned it could be dog. And I'm like, oh, you know, the villages, he said that. And so it went into my mind, and what happens, the enemy places that in your mind. So I'm thinking, okay, so I really had a hard time the very first two times I went to Thailand. Well, this time I'm like, you know what? No, I'm not. and I had zero problems with any food. In fact, I loved everything. I'm like, I'm going to try more. I want, you know, but usually I had a hesitation. Not this, oh, and coffee. I drink so much coffee. This was the first time ever on my trip. They always talk about coffee. I've never had so much coffee in my entire life, and I really enjoyed it. So anyways, it's awesome. Thank you.
The food really is not rough. Rough.
It's not what it used to be. 2011, it was really rough. Yeah, like everybody said, there was a lot of highlights. There's salvations, there's healings, there's so much breakthrough that happened in people's lives. For me, though, I think what I enjoyed the most out of this trip was our team. It was wonderful the way that, like, I think Cheryl mentioned how we flowed together. At one session, I got up to speak. Maybe it was that evening one, and I had Trish and Cheryl share something first, and what they shared, they didn't know what I was going to speak on, but what they shared went, of course, perfectly with what I was going to speak on. And then, I don't know if it was that night or a different session, but in what God gave me, I was talking about the armor of God, and next thing I know, Cheryl like turns around this prophetic drawing that she did, and it was this like woman warrior. She had drawn again, like, you know, the same thing. It's like we all hear from the same God, and it's just that kind of unity that stirs me like no other. Just the way He uses team and works everything together for His good. And so yeah, I got fell off the stage when she showed me. I got rocked, but and then that brought so much breakthrough, because then other people see how God works together as a team, and they're just like, oh, well, you said that, but then it was confirmed, and then it was confirmed, and there's no denying, you know, and it continues to be confirmed. So, and just the last couple of days, this team actually let us check out. Jeremy was the first one. He came up to us when we landed in Phuket, and he said, this is where the two of you go on vacation, and we all can be responsible for ourselves. You don't have to like do everything for us anymore. And I was like, that's a pretty good idea. We could probably use that. And now coming back and like trying to get moved into our house and stuff, it's like, oh, I'm sure glad we had a couple days of just, yeah, the beach, and we got a scooter and rode around the island and napped, and very necessary, and I feel very refreshed and strengthened, thanks to all of you, not just those that were with us that allowed us to have some alone time, but those that were praying and that sent us out. You have no idea. It was great. Jeremy and Victoria got to go this year because they've been sending us to the nations for years, doing everything they can to make it possible for us to go. And then we were on the boat ride one day, and Victoria turned around, she was just like, wow, I get it. Like, what I've been sowing into, now I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it with the breakthrough of these women and the children and just the families. And she's like, we got to figure out a way to do more. It just rocked her. So, yeah, I love, of course, Thailand and the Aka people and the missionaries there, everybody there, but there's no place like home and our team. I love you all.
When everybody was here freezing, it was really cold there. People were in coats. It dipped down to about 84. We can laugh, but at 84, they're putting on coats because they're used to way over 100, so that's a pretty good draw for that. I can tell you that one of the things that really blessed me, how old's Zion? So Zion's 6 and Eden's 8. So I think we get this idea that there's a junior Holy Spirit, and we get this idea. And so we're in a room with about 350 grown women for a conference, and we're going to pray for people. And for those of you who don't know, when we go on a missions trip, we're not, it's not that I'm against it or anything, but what we do is we're not painting, we're not pouring concrete, we're not doing skits. We're actually going and we're ministering, usually to pastors and leaders is about 90% of what we do. And everybody on the team, I don't care if you're a 6-year-old or if you're 21 like Virginia, that everybody is going to minister. And so in one of the sessions there, all these ladies came forward for prayer, and we just started praying for people. And you know, it's just the nature. Everybody wants the person who's speaking to pray for them. And Eden started praying for people, and people just started dropping. Well, the next thing you know, there's ladies getting other ladies, and Eden has a line of people. At 8 years old, he has a line of people that only want her to pray for them. And I'm thinking, Christy's the main speaker here. Why are you? No. But I mean, they were all lined up for an 8-year-old. Why? Because they were experiencing healing. They were experiencing deliverance. They were experiencing all these things. And see, it's God, because there's a language barrier, there's all kinds of things going on there. But here you have an 8-year-old releasing the kingdom, and the people there recognized it, and they weren't looking at how tall she was, they weren't looking at how old she was. What they were looking at is the power and presence of God has come. And you know, it was like the lady with the issue of blood. Yeah, there was another time Christy was praying for a lady, ministering to her, and this other lady really wanted Christy just to pray for her. And so she pushed her way up, and she took Christy's hand off the lady, pulls it over, and as she grabbed her wrist, she went, shoo, and she went down. She was holding on to Christy, about pulled Christy and the other lady over. She just went out. But see, it's not us, it's not our words, it's not, you know, it's who we carry. It's who we carry that makes all the difference in the world. And probably the number one, and I'll find a picture of it because AOF took a whole bunch of pictures, but I mean, Zion 6 is like this. And so it reminded me of when we took Josh Martinez there. But I learned one great thing is when you have a whole bunch of people, I learned one thing from one of my spiritual fathers, Randy Clark, is that when you have a whole bunch of people, when you're praying for one person, you're laying your hand on them, you put your hand on the next person in line, and you're warming them up. And then you just switch. And then you just switch. And it just something Randy said, when you have a whole lot of people, it just makes it so much easier. And it really does. And so I started at one end, and everybody was praying, but we had a whole section we were praying for. And the next thing you know, Zion is right there with me. And he's putting his hand on 2 people just like I was. And God was bam, bam. And we're going down, and some of them, he'd be like on his tippy toe, and if he couldn't reach their head, he'd just touch their chin. Yeah, I mean, he was into it, and whatever I was saying, he was just saying over them because he wasn't 100% sure what to do. But see, God showed up. And then all these people wanted the little 6-year-old boy to pray for him. Why? Because God was showing up in the place. And I think sometimes we think it's a formula, or we think it's a certificate, or we think it's a training. And all those things are important. I'm not negating all those. But the most important thing is to be there with the power and the presence of God. And God comes, and God does the changing, and God does the healing, and God does the growing out of legs, and God does the changing people's heart. God's the one that stops the demonic voices from manifesting. And it's 100% God. And I think we just need to keep all that in mind. Jeremy and Victoria weren't here today because Victoria was sick. He texted me this morning, but I'm just going to have the 4 of them share next week when they come about what God did for them. But I don't know who was more shocked, the people that started falling or eating. She was looking at her hand. It was good. She touched the lady and she went, she goes. And before she could even think about it, other ladies are pushing their way in. I want her to pray for me. chapter 7. Acts chapter 7 is Stephen. I'm just going to do a little portion of the story of Stephen, but I mean, we all know who Stephen was and how Paul was there when Stephen got stoned to death. And, you know, Stephen was bound and determined. He didn't care about the circumstances. He was going to finish his message. I mean, he didn't even care. And at the end, he's just praying, you know, that God would forgive them because they didn't understand what they were doing. And he wanted to make sure that it wasn't held against them for what was going on. But later on in the story of Paul, you hear Paul referring back to Stephen. And you know what? It was Stephen's faith that when Paul was the man there that was holding the coats of the ones who were there killing him. You know, so Paul was very implicit. Paul was the one carrying the authority. Paul was like the sheriff in town, and he had all of his deputies do all the dirty work, and he held their coats, and he just looked on with pride. But there was something that Stephen did at that moment in time that obviously touched Paul, even though he didn't realize it at that exact moment. But you know it touched him. And I think that even the same thing that touched that was the same thing that had to touch those Roman guards when they went to crucify Christ. You know, and usually, you know, they had to be fighting with these people to crucify him. And Jesus was just like, no, I'll just lay down my arms. You don't have to pull on me. You don't have to sit on me. It isn't going to take 3 or 4 people because this is what I'm destined to do. And it had to change their hearts because it was different than everything else they'd experienced. Because Jesus knew it wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. Stephen knew that if he didn't share what he had to share right up to the last minute, he knew that all those who were there that were attacking him were going to perish. And he didn't care because for him, to die is gain. To live, he gets to do it another day. If he dies, he's instantly in paradise. But either way, he's in the middle of the will of the Father. I think so many times we get caught up in all the other things, and we get caught up in would-haves, should-haves, and could-haves, and we look at all the ways we missed it, and we look at all the things that went wrong, instead of just looking at the fact is that just by our presence sometimes we're changing people's lives. I mean, these people up here, I didn't put anybody up to it, but people are talking about who we are there. Well, we just went there to visit our friends in 2011. Nothing more. Absolutely nothing more whatsoever. And we arrived in one night, our first time in Thailand, and the next morning Jay goes, so we have the first year Bible college students here, and this is their very first class. Most of them are just Stanford Villages, and so I'm going to have you teach their very first class ever. And I'm like, great, you know, we don't have any notes, we weren't prepared, we didn't have, I have my Bible and stuff on my iPad, but we went there not to do any of that stuff. And at that moment, what do you teach somebody when it's their very first day in Bible school? Most of them can't read. Lots of them aren't even Christians. They just came down from the village, they need a change, they need something to change in their life. And so, at that moment in time, I just taught them on the biblical basis for healing. And that's a very great first seminary class. You're going to be in a 2-year Bible school, learn how to heal people day one, and it'll change your life. Out of that class, 4 of those young folks are now pastoring churches. And so that's pretty amazing. But the fact is we had no idea what impact that was going to make. And I think since 2011, this was like our 12th trip there. It was actually our shortest trip we've ever done there. It was only 10 days. And God just shows up. Why? Because we allow Him to. It isn't something special we do. We're not extraordinary in any way, shape, or form. It's just we just allow God to work. And just being open just being willing to go and just being willing to minister. And through that, God just shows up and people are just changed. And I really believe everybody that goes on our team gets changed at least as much, if not more, than those we're ministering to. And so, going back to our story here, in chapter 7 is the speech that Stephen starts. This is the thing that kicks off everything against him, but I really believe that what he has to say here is so vitally important, because what he has to say here is what really began this whole change in, at the time, Saul, who would then write most of the New Testament, where most of our doctrine actually comes from. And Stephen says, "Brothers and fathers, hear me. The God of glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he lived in Haran, and said to him, 'Go out from your land and from all your kindred, and go into a land that I will show you.' And he went out from the land of the Chaldeans to live in Haran. And after his father died, God removed him from there into the land which you are now living. Yet he gave him no inheritance in it, not even a foot's length, but promised to give it to him as a possession in his offspring after him, though he had no child. God spoke this to effect that his offspring would be sojourners in a land that belonged to others, who would enslave them and afflict them for 400 years. But I will judge the nation that they will serve, and said God, and after that they shall come out and worship me in this place. And he gave him a covenant of circumcision, so that Abraham became the father of Isaac, and circumcised him on the 8th day. And Isaac became the father of Jacob, and Jacob the 12 patriarchs. And the patriarchs, jealous of Joseph, sold him into Egypt. But God was with him and rescued him out of his affliction, and gave him favor and wisdom before Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, who was made ruler over Egypt and over all of his household. And now there came a famine throughout all of Egypt and Canaan, and a great affliction, and our fathers could find no food. But when Jacob heard there was no grain in Egypt, he sent our fathers on their first visit. And on their second visit, Joseph made himself known to his brothers, and Joseph's family became known to Pharaoh. And Joseph sent and summoned Jacob his father and all of his kindred, and 75 persons in all. And Jacob went down to Egypt, and he died. He and our fathers and all were carried back to Shechem and laid in a tomb that Abraham had brought for a sum of silver from the sons of Hamor and Shemek." You see, what is Stephen doing here? He was preaching a brand new doctrine. He came up with this great new twist, and he got back into the original languages. He didn't do any of those things. He wasn't being elegant. He wasn't coming up with this new thing. It wasn't the new, latest, greatest thing. What he was doing was, he was going back and telling the testimony of how they had arrived where they were. I think so many times we forget how we arrived where we are. We really forget how we end up in the place where we are. A few months back, we had the honor of hosting a funeral here for one of the founders of Lafayette. And they grew up in this area. They owned about probably 1/3 of all that Lafayette sits on and beyond. And they went to a little Episcopal church down here their whole life. And it was being remodeled, and no church would let them use their building because we don't like the way they do things. We don't like their doctrine. So I didn't know at the time. We told them they could use the church building. I didn't know who he was. They just needed to use the church building. And it was open that day, and sure, you can use our church building. But come to find out, the son of the man we were doing the funeral for, the very property our church sits on, was one of the sections that as a kid he was in charge of farming. He planted here, he watered here, It was a dirt road. He remembers when they sold the property right there and they gave it to the Baptist church that built the first little church here on the front. See, we don't realize what it took to end up who we are. I mean, they were here before it was even Lafayette. Right across is the Wanika Lake, right across the street here in the subdivision. His dad and his uncle dug that lake so that they could water their cattle. It was named after that. I had no idea when we did this. But see, it just goes to show we got to look back at what our history was. And all Stephen was doing was he was telling the history of how they ended up where they were. And see, God gave Abram a promise. He went back to the very promise God gave Abram. And I think so many times we think when God gives us a promise, it's going to be this great thing, which it is. There's no doubt in my mind. If God makes you a promise, it's going to be a great thing. If God comes to move in your life, it's going to be a great thing. It's going to be a life-changing thing. But the problem is when God tells us something, we get a preconceived idea in our mind of how that's going to play out and what it's going to look like at the end. And we take the promise, and in our own mind, we architecturally and engineer what we think it's going to look like, how we think it's going to play out. And you know what? The promise he gave to Abram, I guarantee you when Abram left, he had no idea that he was going to leave great wealth and a great amount of land to never own another piece of land again. Stephen points out, he didn't even own a foot. He didn't even own a place where he could put his 2 feet together. It was not his. But yet God promised him an inheritance that was so great. Even when he was very, very old, he didn't even have any children, but God had made a promise to him. How many times do we give up before we ever reach our promise? How many times do we get frustrated because it doesn't roll out the way we think it should roll out? See, all Stephen was doing is, Stephen was just going back and recounting what God had did and what brought him to this place. He just starts there at Abram and he goes all the way to Jesus. And then they killed him. But you know what? It was that single account that lit that spark in Paul's heart. And then Paul took it to a whole other level. I want to encourage you is that God has put promises, God has put destiny in each and every one of our lives, and we can't play it out the way we think it's going to be played out. We need to let God play it out, because if we play it out the way we think it should be played out, then it's going to be us. See, the beautiful thing is we went to Thailand just to visit our friends. We got saved at Faith Bible Chapel. There was a missionary Faith Bible Chapel sent out and sent to a YWAM base in Australia, who met this Aka man, who then ended up staying in Thailand and getting married. And when they started a seminary, the very first year, the very first class, I was in that seminary, and Ajay and Nancy came back, and Ajay went to the same seminary as me, and that's how we met. For years, we were very close friends, and they kept trying to get us to go to Thailand. Every time we planned to go to Thailand to be with them, something happened. And the very last time I said, Ajay, I'm not going to let anything stop us from coming. And there was actually a June that we were planning on going to Thailand. And this year it'll be 15 years. Was that June? And we said, no matter what, we're going to be there. And then God, Jehovah Sneaky, who just sneaks up on us, he changes things, and in May we end up starting a church. And so you can't start a church and then just pack up and leave. So we started in May. We were supposed to be there in June, so I had to cancel them again. But then our daughter went and did an internship in Australia. And they said, I know a mother And a mother is not going to be able to be away from her baby girl for a whole entire year. So, not if, but when you come to Australia, you're already halfway across the world. Just come from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere, and you come up and see us, because you've been promising us for years you were going to do it. And sure enough, prophetically, naturally, whatever, they were exactly right. Before the year was up, we had to go to Australia, see our daughter, and we went up, and that's how we ended up being there the first time. It wasn't planned, it wasn't strategized. And the minute we went there, God gave us favor. God gave us favor after favor, and then each year it's just increased. And now we're going 2 times a year. It's just a favor of God. And, you know, we think his favor being this great thing. Well, you know what? Joseph got favor by being in prison. His favor came from being in prison. Abram's favor came from leaving everything he knew, everything he owned, and then getting betrayed by Lot. He ended up time after time after time. But you know what? The favor of God was still there, and God's plan will play out. Just like that song we sang this morning. You know what? Everything that God has spoken will come to pass. And I used to always say that every prophetic word we have will come to pass, but the fact is, it's not true, because one side of it will always come to pass, but we got to choose to walk into those things. If God gives you a prophetic word, you're going to be a missionary, and you never get a passport, and you never leave your church, and you never go anywhere, God can't fulfill that if you're not willing to put feet and go someplace. And when you go there, they might feed you a dog. And whether you like it or not, that's just what it is. But it's in those times, in those trying times, is where God shows up and he changes your life. It's in those times where you're saying, God, I don't understand this. This isn't my choice. This isn't what I want to eat. This isn't where I want to be. But it's in those times when you're going where God called you to go and doing what God called you to do. It's in those times that God shows up. Why? Because he knows it's not you, and most of the people around you realize it's not you. And so when it happens, they know it has to be God. See, God wants to show up in each and every one of our lives. God wants to be manifest in us. And the other thing is, we got to let God be God.
Yes.
I got to tell you is, I don't think everybody realizes we get progressive knowledge, we get progressive wisdom. God, if he told us everything all at once, we'd be on overload and we would just sit down and turn off. Well, we got to get input from all kinds of sources. We got to get input from within, from without, from all around. And we got to be able to filter that. You got to be able to take the meat and throw away the bones. And you got to be able to move and change. I think it's very funny here in the past few months, because I've been around a lot of Global Awakening people from Randy Clark's organization. And now all these other people are going out and they're leading trips and they're leading conferences and they're doing things, and it's without Randy. Why? Because there has to be multiplication. And guess what? They don't do things the same way. But one thing I did notice in the last few we've been at, everybody says, so now we're going to do this, but don't tell Randy that we're not doing it the way he does it, because this is the way God does it with me. And I think sometimes we need to get in that mindset of, you know what, don't tell Randy, don't tell whoever the case may be, is because why? God is doing something new. And when we get stuck in a certain way, and we get stuck in certain things, and we let that stop us from moving forward into what God has, and just understand that God has greater revelation. A while back, through a whole series of events, we ended up with a Presbyterian man here named Michael Heiser, Dr. Michael Heiser, and phenomenal man of God. But reads and writes in Greek, Aramaic, and Hebrew. It's his specialty. And he uses books that aren't the Bible. Not as doctrine, but as reference. He uses books that aren't the Bible. Can you believe that? And in that, he figured out that when you read other books of that time period, when the Bible says something, for instance, like serpent in Genesis, that you realize that serpent to the hearers of that time was not an animal, it was a spiritual being. Had nothing to do with an animal. There was no such thing as a serpent. In any other literature, the word serpent was used to describe a spiritual being. And so, when we get our mindset on every picture we've ever seen, that it's a snake coming down the tree with an apple, and it never really says it's an apple either, but we get these things in our mind, and then when somebody says anything contrary, we immediately shut off because it's not what we've been taught. Then we're missing what God is trying to do. So this man comes with different revelation. I got to tell you, it's not extra biblical. He's just using references from around to see what the word, what the context really was, what people thought when this sentence was said, when these words were said, what it really meant to the hearers of that time, not what it means to us. And all of a sudden now, people go, well, I could never follow that because it goes against all these things I've been taught in school and all these things in books I've written. It goes against all these things that everybody's gave me. I got to tell you, I guarantee you, when Paul heard this, Paul had a different idea about the Messiah. When he got knocked off his horse, he had a greater revelation on the Messiah that probably went against lots of things he had been taught. Later on, when he's in prison, when he's been shipwrecked, when he's been beaten, he had a greater revelation of who Jesus was than when he heard Stephen speak. And you know what? His theology changed along the way. I was telling this morning, it'd be very interesting to find out if Paul had any of the writings, because you just don't all of a sudden become a writer. And Paul was very affluent. Paul was very outspoken. Paul came from the greatest college. There's other teachings and other history books and stuff of stuff Paul taught that probably totally contradicts what was in the Bible, in the books he wrote later on, which actually weren't books, they were just letters. You see, God is moving. And when we become putting God in a box, when we think that God is stagnant and God can only do certain things certain ways. Trish was thinking, oh, I'm going to have to do a deliverance. All she had to do is say Jesus and the lady got delivered. Didn't have to lay hands on her. See, we serve a loving, caring, supernatural God. And he can do all things in all circumstances. And I believe sometimes he just lets us go into our circumstances. You know, Joseph, to walk into his destiny, had to go to prison. And when Joseph got the prophetic word, the dream, about all of his brothers coming bound down to him, he had no idea that he was going to get sold out by his brothers, thrown in the pit, sold in and out of jail. He had no idea that he was going to go from a slave to being the second highest ranking person in all of Egypt. Before his brothers would come and bow before him. And it was at that moment that he realized, when he looked out and saw his brothers all bowed down waiting for food, at that moment he realized, this is what God meant. And if I hadn't to walk through all this, I would never obtain this. I'm not saying that God puts all those circumstances in our place. I don't think God predestined that his brothers would sell him. God just knew they were going to do it. And he was going to take the lemons in life and he was going to turn them into lemonade. A very profitable lemonade in that case. God is trying to speak and move in each and every one of our lives. And you know what? Every word he has spoken will come to pass if we cooperate with him. And we stop doing things our own way, and we stop trying to make things happen. Does that make sense? I'm excited about what God's doing all over the world. Hey Taylor, you guys can come up. Somebody out in the lobby goes, "You look so refreshed after being on a trip." I only preached twice. Usually we're going for like 15 days, and we usually do it 3 to 4 times a day.
It was the beach.
On the beach. And that high-powered 50cc scooter. It makes all the difference in the world if you have a scooter. We really got upgraded this year because one year we were there, we had a pink Scoopy. Had a knockoff picture of a Snoopy on the side. It's called a Scoopy in bright pink. Looked very nasty, driving a pink scooter down the road. We got upgraded to a black Yamaha this year. You know what? God has upgrades in your life. God has great things. But we have to be willing to hear from Him. We have to be willing to listen to Him. And we have to be willing to let Him work things out the way He wants to work them out and not the way that we want to work them out. Cheryl was just happy I just didn't leave her behind anywhere. It gets hectic. Going from here to here to here to here. I think we made Virginia walk more in 10 days than she's walked in a month. But when God takes us out of our comfort zone, that's when we have to rely on Him. So this morning I'm just going to pray that God would take each and every one of you out of your comfort zone. And I want you to go. I'm not praying you go to prison. I'm not praying you lose your job. I'm not praying that all those things happen. What I am going to pray is that God would take you out of your comfort zone. And it's going to be your choice on when He speaks to you, whether you walk out willingly or whether you fall down and get drug out. I mean, I'm just being honest because Christy hates confined spaces and she never wanted to be on an airplane. And I mean, I'm not like any of my friends that have, I mean, I have 250,000 miles. I have friends that have 3 million. So I'm not living on a plane, but you know what? Still 250,000 miles for somebody who didn't want to be on a plane and sitting on a plane for hours on end. See, God takes us out of our comfort zone so that He can break us down and use us. He takes us out of where we are. Lord, I just pray this morning, Lord, that you would take each and every one of us, Lord, even myself included, Lord, just take us out of our comfort zone. Lord, we no longer want to just be comfortable, Lord. We want to be where you are, Lord. Lord, I just pray that you give us a revelation of what it really means to die is gain, but to live is Christ. Lord, give us a fresh revelation of how each step we take here is really making a difference on where you want us to be, where you would have us, what you would have us do. Lord, I do pray that you would just come in all your might, in all your fury, in all your loving kindness, in all your grace, in all your mercy, come and invade our lives and change us for the King and the kingdom. Lord, I just thank you for the release you're giving people in their lives today, Lord. The release in ministry, Lord. The release in what you called them to do, Lord. Lord, we don't no longer just want to be pew sitters, Lord. We want to be walking into our destiny. We want to walk into the fullness of what you have for us, Lord. Lord, we want to walk into the fullness of what we've been created to do, to be. Lord, we want to go where you want us to go. We want to do what you want us to do. Lord, I just pray this morning that you would invade. Lord, even come in today, Lord, in the form of a spiritual tsunami where it just comes out of the blue and just totally invades and floods and turns our lives upside down, takes away the things that you want to take away, and Lord, gives us the things that you want to give us. Lord, we just give you permission today to come and to, in a gentle, kind, loving way, like you always do, come and change our lives.
That all the earth rejoice, that all the earth rejoice. He wraps himself in love, and darkness tries to hide, and trembles at his voice, and trembles at his voice.
We're going to close the service, so if you need to leave, please feel free. If you want to stay and get prayer, please come up. And be blessed, have a great week, and we will see you next time.
Is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God, and all see how great and how great is our
Tom just texted me.
Do you hear artificial? I was in Amazon for costume, and they called me artificial instead.
That's because you don't have a chocolate filling. So you are artificial.
No.
Yeah, you're not a real M&M's. M&M's have chocolate in them. I don't care what.
Do you like
The ones that just have peanut butter are not M&M's. They're just gross. I actually like them.
Hey Dom, what's it in? What's it in?
It's in iTunes.
Yeah, but what channel?
Oh, it's 25.
That's all.
Your dad ever call you out or something?
He commented on it.
It's a live stream. I told you how to turn it off. Deb. Hey Dom, grab Caswell. Grab Caswell.
I saw two sides.
Don't be surprised.
Okay.
There you go.
See you. You too.
Yeah, you know, I was like, I'm just guessing it lasted like 5 seconds.
No, she said yes. She said,
What's up, Jeremy?
you can start right now, or I couldn't wear heels huge. And I really
See you
like
next week. We're going to enter the schedule. We'll probably have you served on March 10th. Next week.
Can you do Ariana Grande heels?
Oh
yeah. Really? Of course I can.
She's like 6 inches of leathers.
I know. Did you see when she was on like I think it was like a show and she was performing like on a chair or something and she almost fell? I'm surprised she didn't fall. She has talent.
Oh look, I'm zoomed into Lauren and Kate and Landon.
She's got